Hey there everybody, Professor Cloud here with episode 17 of Professor Builds an Anno 1800 Empire. In the last episode, we really were trying to stabilize and build up Newcastle for the tourists, for electricity, oil production, all of those kinds of things, as well as spend a lot of time in Crown Falls, wrapping up much of the quest lines from the Queen, and things along those lines. However, we've kind of left ourselves in a place where we need to really take a look at the rest of everything else. The smaller islands, the new world, and get some stabilization around there, because we've got some issues with respect to routing and making sure that resources are where they need to be in the right time. There are definitely some opportunities on some of the smaller islands to maybe go to the next level of resource to increase population, things like that, and therefore increase revenue. And then there is still some last few minute things to do in Crown Falls. But the big one here in this episode that we want to focus on is finishing that electricity stabilization for Newcastle, which requires us to bring oil from Luton over into Newcastle. We were stuck in a situation where there wasn't quite enough electricity on Newcastle to build out the tanker. Hopefully we'll have that resolved in this episode. One thing I do want to call out, though, is unfortunately when I was recording the episode, there was a big problem with respect to my microphone. It was not actually capturing me at all. So this is going to this episode will sound a little disjointed, and I apologize for that, because I'm going to have to put the voiceover after the episode has already been recorded. So be patient. It's still great content, and hopefully I will see you in the next episode. Okay, here we are back in Crown Falls, and the first thing that I want to make sure to do is take care of my two ships that are sitting here in port. They are the two ships that I've typically been using for any salvage operations, and as I'm looking here, I noticed that there are definitely some things that I need to remove from the ship, especially the scepter, because the scepter is going to be a part of the museum that we build here, per one of the requests from the Queen. We also have some aluminum that I had gotten from the New World. Want to make sure to drop that off so that we can build some post offices or mailboxes in order to get some additional revenue and increase our population here in Crown Falls. In addition, I want to make sure that I take these two ships over to Nate, because Nate does have a quest available to us, and hey, maybe we've got something else to salvage. So let's go ahead and do that, and then I think we're going to take a little time and adjust the audio again, like I've done God knows how many times in this video series, trying to get the volumes right, but still not get copyright stricken, I guess the right phrase. Now the next step is, once we've got the aluminum, it's time to build out some post offices. So the first thing, though, is understanding how big the post office is and how big the circle, the sphere is, to encompass as many of the houses as possible to then turn on that particular lifestyle need. The best place obviously looks like it's right there in the center. So we're going to want to make some moves throughout the area. However, I think what we're going to do is focus on the workers first, because they are going to give us a better bang for our buck as far as revenue numbers and increase in population. But of course, that's still going to require some moves as well. Yep, so we're going to put it there in the middle, but we need to move about 4 worker houses, I believe, in order to get the post office in the right place. There's still going to end up being a little bit of empty land, but it'll still end up working out and get the majority of the entire worker population within the scope of the post office in order to, again, get as much revenue and population increase as possible. So we'll move those 2 houses as well. Then plant the post office there in the middle. and turn on the lifestyle need. I'm a big fan of the post offices. It's a really easy way to add a lifestyle need without, having to plant anything or have, a huge population requirement in order to use those post offices. The next thing is I noticed there that the lifestyle need related to beef, which is something dedicated to workers, was empty. And I'm trying to figure out right now, I have 0 beef in my inventory, which doesn't make any sense because I am using beef to create canned good, but if I am consuming all of that beef all at one time, then absolutely that is going to make a difference. And of course the newspaper pops up. And sewing machines are out in a place where I had not created sewing machines. It's one of my pet peeves about this game is that they intentionally will make the game harder on you.
Ship constructed.
That is the tanker right there that's just been constructed. Fantastic. We'll be able to go and get our oil moving between Luton and Newcastle after this. But first, with no additional cattle being created, I took a look and I saw we can use the silo. So let's go ahead and turn the silo on for this particular cattle farm, which will either double the production or increase the production by 50%. I forget which one it is. But in order to accommodate for that particular silo farm, we will need to plant another wheat farm, which is what is happening here. Copying one and just pasting it right in. Nice and simple.
We've run out of cabins.
So what I noticed here was that the tallow plant was not getting any goods. It was missing goods, the soap factory was missing goods, which didn't make any sense based on the time to produce. That was just a little bit of cleanup there to move things around. And then validating that we've got the mail going. The cattle will catch up once the wheat has been delivered to the silo, so we won't need to worry about that. And everything's looking good. Now, this is where we want to build out an additional post office to get the artisans, because that's also a nice little sizable increase in population as well as increase in revenue. And that one's a little bit easier because we don't quite have as many artisan houses as we do with the workers or the farmers. So just put it right there in the middle and it covers everybody without any problem.
What a happy vision of yours.
Even after we start to move houses over, that one single post office should cover the artisans without any problem at all. Good idea to go ahead and upgrade a few more workers to artisans to take advantage of those improvements. Plus, if you look at the numbers, we had way more workers than we needed. Of course, we've got way more artisans than we need as well. The great thing about that is that all is revenue.
Something for you to fiddle with.
We'll never surpass Mother Nature's powers of invention, I don't imagine, not unless we start taking her weirdest creations apart and stirring them through their insides. The problem is this particular quest is in the old world, and at the moment I just don't want to be sending ships back and forth if there's not really a good reason, and I mean, this is a treasure map, so there's really no way of telling at the moment what kind of return you're going to get. So at the moment, I think we're just going to keep our ships here on Crown Falls. So the next piece of this is just a little bit of cleanup. As I've been clicking around within the different houses, turning things on, validating that the local mail was actually running properly, it was definitely clear that there were a few needs, luxury items and things like that for both workers and artisans that were running a little low. One of the things that we definitely saw here is that wool was a little light. And of course, as population grows, you're just going to need more and more, so there's really no reason to not do something about it. So with us having just put in a silo on the cattle farm, there's no reason why we can't go ahead and do the exact same thing with one of the sheep farms. And one of the sheep farms already has a silo, so we'll go ahead and put one here. And then of course that's going to require more wheat. But let's make sure that we've got enough wheat based on production. We are running a couple of tons short of supply versus demand, so makes sense to implement 2 more wheat farms rather than just 1, and we'll just put them on the opposite side of the road. Nice and neat. And then being we've implemented all of these new farms and silos, we obviously, required some more farmers there, so I just went ahead and put in a few more farms. I think it was 8, in order to kind of counterbalance that deficit. Here I'm just kind of looking around, seeing what other items I potentially need. Rum is the one that's always in a deficit, no matter what island we're looking at. Rum is always a problem, and it's so hard to unlock in the export-import section of the Docklands. You have to unlock all the way through goulash, canned food, before you can ever get to rum, and it's such a huge requirement to get there. So we're just taking a look now to see if there's any other resources that the artisans in particular need, while of course, one of the Anne is deciding to reduce our reputation with her. We're not quite at the point artisan wise. We need about another 200 or so to get to the next level of requirement for artisans before we can upgrade to engineers. So the next thing that we're going to take a look at is how to fulfill the museum quest from the Queen. I want to make sure that we put the museum as close to the public mooring as possible, because that's going to give us the best revenue, the most number of tourists, and for some reason Anne is no longer happy with us anymore, even though, by the way, she is listed as an ally.
Things like one of us.
So I don't understand the diplomacy AI at all. Something we'll talk about in a little bit. But what we're going to do now, I think, is find the best place to put the museum. We've already got the scepter. That'll go in the museum. And then, as we can find additional items, we'll make sure to put those in as well. And that'll, of course, increase the attractiveness of Crown Falls as a whole. What I'm looking at doing here is putting the museum at the very bottom of where the farmers are currently located. It's not necessarily the most ideal situation or position, but it does make the most sense with respect to where the public mooring is. Now, in the future, we can absolutely take a look at moving, all of population up to a further away from the coastline. What I need to do is, in order for me to move any of the farms from the bottom road up to the top, I need to make sure that I've got a pub and that I've got a marketplace close by, because those are going to be 2 major requirements. And the existing pub and marketplace are in the middle of the housing section, so that's the reason why we implemented a new pub and marketplace. And then once we've got that, it's going to be fairly easy to move all of the farms up close to that, and then we've got the necessary coverage from a needs perspective to accommodate for all of the existing farms. We've still got a couple more farms to move. This I'm just kind of moving the marketplace and pub up closer to the road to make it a little bit cleaner. A lot of people will look at this, and you're not wrong by this, is that I'm wasting a lot of money by doing all these moves, because I did turn that on in the difficulty. However, I got 7.6 mil in the bank. I think I'm okay. I decided to go ahead and put in some more brick road. It's not as big of a deal in the housing areas, but it does maintain consistency and still move people a little bit faster than if they were on a dirt road. And then moving the last 4 houses so that everyone is nice and neat. And now we can build out the museum. So under the artisan section is the museum. The zoo's there too, but museum's there. Now, at some point in the future, based on what we've learned over in Newcastle, I'll want to make sure that I put a bus stop probably in the middle of that to make it feel closer to the public mooring. Here we're just going to go ahead and
People will come from far and wide to behold the scepter of Capon, the ultimate exponent.
And there's our first exhibit.
Extra, extra!
Behold the Scepter of Capon, an exhibition to show off the reclaimed Scepter of Capon, an heirloom said to run in the blood of Her Majesty and epitomize the triumph over La Corona at Trelawney. Opened its grand doors earlier today. The queuing was endless, for not only were there denizens of Trelawney in attendance, but curious and patriotic visitors from all corners of the empire.
My dreams, one's youthful imaginings of this place of triumph, so dutifully have you made whole. In particular, I am indebted to you for helping me see the king, my father, as he really was, warts and all. I always believed my father when he claimed to be the unsung mastermind at the Battle of Trelawney, but it was Nadaski all along that was saving his blushes.
Okay, so she's given us another quest here to sail to the HMS Lap of Victory to receive Admiral Nadaski's military regalia. So just going to grab one of the ships that's sitting here in port, send it over to her, because God forbid she doesn't come to us, and she's queen after all.
I may have been wrong about Admiral Nadaski. Upon my return to the capital, I shall have a great big pillar built in his honor.
So she's given us the Admiral Nadaski saber, another item, and then...
It's high time I return to rescue poor old Archie. He may otherwise start chattering about his bowels. Look after Crown Falls for me, won't you? I only really care for the taxes now.
Of course she does. She's the queen. So she's got one final quest, and that is to escort her off the map. So we're doing that. We do have the saber and the medallion, or medal, Nadaski's medal. Both of those are museum items, as you can see here. So after we do the escort, we'll make sure to build exhibits for both of those. And then we got a Harbor Master item that we can put into the Docklands after we come back. While we're doing this escort, one of the things that I want to talk about is the future of this particular season. This pretty much brings the Sunken Treasures DLC questline to a close. So in the future, I am going to continue to build some things out, get Newcastle a little bit larger, a little bit more stable, especially with respect to electricity, and get more engineers in place. Definitely going to do a lot of that with respect to Crown Falls as well. Want to make sure that I get that 500 engineers to clear out that particular quest.
And become a pillar of our nation.
But around in about 2.5 weeks, The Warden of Trelawney. After great service to both a city and a nation, Heinrich van Hopp has been officially appointed Warden of Trelawney and Governor of Crown Falls at a grand ceremony conducted by Her Majesty the Queen, Empress Royal of the Southern Territories. So in a couple of weeks, there is a new builder game coming out called SteamWorld Build, and I am going to be taking a look at that. So we'll have this season of Anno 1800 wrapped up.
New horizons.
And then we will come back later to do Season 3, which will be Land of the Lions. Okay, so our ship is back from the escort, and we've got 2 items that we want to put into our museum here. Let's go ahead and create a couple of new exhibits and place Nadaski's saber and medal. Excellent. So that's...
Your city has grown more beautiful.
That's bumped us up over 1,000 in attractiveness for Crown Falls. It also doesn't have any of the negatives that Newcastle has, such as the pollution, things like that. It does still have some of the vulgarity with respect to pigs and sausage farms and stuff like that, but slaughterhouses, but it definitely does not have all of the pollution that Newcastle has with respect to the steel factories and things like that. So what we're seeing right now is fur coats are lacking with respect to the artisans. The problem is right now on Crown Falls, in order to create fur coats, we need cotton fabric, which can only come from the New World, and then we can actually do fur coats. But we can also get fur coats from the import-export section because we have that unlocked. So what we need to find here is another resource that we can use to purchase those particular fur coats. And we're going to spin up a 4th import-export office so that we can actually do that. Yeah, we're just looking here and seeing how far away from cotton fabric we are. A lot of the unlocks in the import-export are dependent on how many import-export offices you have. Now, thankfully, it's game-wide. So, instead of what I probably should have done was set up a new import-export office, but I didn't really have a resource that I thought that would work well. So, instead, we're just swapping out the sausages for the fur coats. Now, the problem is, of course, 7 tons of fur coats is really not that big of a number, but it'll at least get us started. Alright, so
Good and ready.
we do have a new individual that we can put into the Harbor Master's office. So we definitely want to make sure to do that. So we're going and grabbing him out of the ship that picked him up from the Queen. And then I realized, as I got here, that I don't have a Harbor Master's office connected to the Docklands at all. And of course that's an issue. So I actually am going to go through the process of not only putting in a new Harbor Master's office, but I also am going to go ahead and put in another import-export office as well, and thereby allowing us to import some extra goods. And then we get ourselves a new visitor as well. And then I have to figure out where it is in the Docklands that the Harbor Master's office is. So that I can actually place our new visitor. And there we go. Hogarth, the Harbor Master. Veteran of Trelawney. So he increases loading speed, as well as, I believe, some kind of, not necessarily production, but trade amounts, things like that. And then, as you saw, I did put in a new import-export office. And for this one, we're going to put in pigs and beer. But as you can see, the transfer ratio is not very good. And even if, over time, we use a lot of pigs, it's still going to take a while. I think it's 1,000 before you can get to your specialty exports. Because the more that you use a particular item across all of your Docklands import-export offices, they will get specialization and thereby get better import-export ratios. The other reason for doing this is I wanted to take a look at my beer production here on Crown Falls. It feels like it's not really producing enough. And if we look at what's available in our inventory, we saw that we had full up on hops, full up on malts, but yet we still weren't really producing enough beer to keep the artisans happy, or keep the artisans and workers happy, I think. And yet, when we look here at production, my wheat production is now equal 9 and 9. We're going to get down to hops, and that's at, I believe, 2 and 2. But malt, we're actually producing 4 and only need 2. So that's a situation where I think we can actually put in another brewery to increase our beer production on Crown Falls. And of course, as we do grow our population there, that's probably something we're going to want to do.
Don't trust me? It's the other way around.
Okay, here we are back in Newcastle, and we've got 2 ships sitting in the harbor doing nothing. One of them has got a couple of items left over from Crown Falls for some reason. I'm going to need to send that back at some point. But the big one in the harbor to think about is the new oil tanker, and we need to get that working between Luton Town and Newcastle to transport oil, to make sure that we've got some stability from a electricity perspective. However, we do have a new quest here. We are presently trying to teach chimps and bonobos to perform human tasks, and would like a fleet of bicycles on which we can wheel them to the park. Would you be able to help? So bicycles being penny farthings. We do have penny farthings coming in through the import-export office, but I don't know right here where or how many we're bringing in. But as I get to the import-export office, I notice up in the top that there are 2 boats that are currently waiting to get in. So I'm putting in a new dock right here, or pier, so that we can make sure to get trades running a little bit smoother, a little bit faster. I don't want Tobias, who only comes in every 20 minutes anyway, to sit there and wait for another 20 because he doesn't have a pier to actually do his trade. So we've dropped that in. That's going to then, and you can actually see the lineup of the boats.
Don't really interest me.
One of the big problems with using the Docklands is it automatically moves all traffic to the Docklands, rather than keeping some of it where your main port is. So I can already tell that I'm absolutely going to have to put in another pier, and maybe even move some of the buildings around the Docklands. But then here's where we are actually finding out that 12 tons of penny farthings are all that we're bringing in with each import-export trip. And it's kind of a bad ratio. I mean, we're spending 50 tons of guns to get 12 tons of penny farthings. And although that actually works out fine, we haven't been using those guns, and we're going to notice in a little bit later that we're going to need to move up to advanced weapons.
Principled as you claim.
So new quest coming in from George.
Make your case.
Let's keep our happiness above 25 for 5 minutes. So both of those two will run simultaneously, waiting for things to happen. In the meantime, we're just taking a quick look here at our attractiveness for Newcastle. We've got a lot of culture, we've got some nature, but the big problem is vulgarity and pollution. I talked about this when we were over in Crown Falls. The slaughterhouses, the pig farms. There's no way to get away from those from a vulgarity perspective unless you have a trade union and a specific item that's supposed to reduce the negativity from those two items. And then pollution-wise, the oil refinery is a big one. The furnaces, the steel works, all of those together are producing a lot of pollution. Okay, so it's time to get our oil tanker working. And just like with any other resource, we're going to want to set up a route. And we're going to set up the route between Luton and Newcastle. And for whatever particular reason, the default is 400 gallons of oil. And with a medium harbor, you're only storing 750, so it's more than 50% of the total population. I do not like Top Banana as a ship name, so we're going to go ahead and make a modification to that, and we're calling it the Sludge Queen. Well, you know, it's transporting oil. I'm trying to be funny. I am going to absolutely change the route numbers, so I'm leaving it at 400 for that first trip, but then after it's done its first trip, which will not take very long, then we'll make the modification to set it to 200 each. And then we'll see how much production on Luton can be handled via those oil fields. And then the Jolly Roger that I said had a couple of items from Crown Falls, I'm going to send that back to Crown Falls. And then it's just a question of waiting for the oil. It's actually a two-part process. One is waiting for the oil to be delivered from Luton. The other is waiting for the oil to be delivered from the harbor to any of the electrical plants, the oil electrical plants, because that's what is then going to deliver the electricity to any connected building. So we're just waiting on that to happen. In the meantime, I am starting to take a look at what other ships are available, and one of the ones that I definitely want to work on in this episode is the cargo ship. Cargo ships have a capacity for 6 items rather than the 3 that are only available in frigates. So we definitely want to try and take advantage of a cargo ship. It's got better speed, plus the extra capacity, and it'll be a continuous speed, whereas with frigates, you run into a problem of you hit a headwind, you put too much on it, it slows it down. You don't have that problem with a steamship. So what we're looking at here is the major routes that are running between the old world and the new world. We've got the one that runs work clothes over to Madrid, then drops down to Barcelona and picks up 150 tons of rum to come back to Newcastle.
A competitor raised a settlement.
The other ones to keep in mind are cotton that's coming back and forth from Sevilla to Newcastle in order to be able to do fur coats. And then I believe that there is one other one as well that we can also take a look at in order to make sure that we have the most efficient running of boats. But I can't make a new ship until the oil has been transported from Luton to Newcastle. A little bit of cleanup here after upgrading and moving some housing from the worker population up to the artisan population. Over time, I fully would expect that the population will completely move from like very, very few farmers to more workers and artisans, and then eventually more artisans and engineers And then eventually the last tier is investors, which I don't think we'll be implementing in this particular series. Maybe. Definitely not this season. Maybe in a future season. I'm taking a look here at what some of the other items are that engineers use. So penny farthings is actually a luxury need, but as I mentioned, it requires Calchuck to make. I have everything else that is needed for penny farthings, but I do not have the Calchuck. That comes from the New World. If we can unlock Calchuck in the Export-Import office, well, then we'll be okay and we can create our own. And this is where we're taking a look at what some of the items are that are available for import and export. You know, I mean, we're bringing in bombins right now because of all of our extra spectacles, and you know, they are just a luxury need. I mean, they might even be a lifestyle need. But the other big ones that we're going to need are chocolate, which we just recently unlocked, and that's a horrible ratio at the moment. But the big one that engineers need are coffee. We need gold in order to be able to do pocket watches. Pocket watches, however, I believe can be purchased somewhere, and I just got to figure out where to. So that's something to think about for the future. But then, you know, what resources can we sell to take advantage of them? That's the other problem is, okay, great, we've unlocked something, but what are we going to actually trade in order to get those resources that we need? You know, one option I'm sitting here looking at, and I didn't even notice while I was playing, was windows. We've got 850 windows. That's an option. Yeah, so coffee is the next big one that engineers need. And then pocket watches is the next one that they want from a luxury perspective or a happiness perspective. And then eventually we'll want to, of course, build a bank. So coffee is right now only available through the New World. So one thing that we will want to probably do in the next episode, and I've already written it down, is to really focus on getting an additional route running for coffee from the New World to the Old World, so that it can go along with something else. You just got to figure out which island in the New World do we want to do that with. Okay, so the tanker has just dropped off its first load of oil, so now it's just getting it delivered and making sure that that has been delivered. So I do not know. Yeah, here I'm switching it down to 200 after that first drop off. I'm probably going to need to drop it down even further because Luton and Newcastle are right next to one another. But we'll have to take a look at that over time and see if it ever gets in a place where it doesn't have the ability to do what it needs to. What I was getting ready to say, though, was one of the big problems that I'm not completely understanding is railroad routing. The game gives you the ability to consistently keep upgrading your harbor so that it can store more and more oil. But I'm actually starting to wonder if it doesn't want you to have multiple harbors so that you can have multiple railroads, because there's only one in and out location of each harbor. So even though, yes, you can see what I've done, which is build parallel rails so that multiple trains can run, it doesn't really make things better. So we're back taking a look at coffee, which is going to increase our engineers by 2 per household with 18 coins per household. That's the one thing about engineers, man. Once we start getting those resources in, man, they are just a cash cow. They are an absolute cash cow. All right, time to do a little bit of upgrading. Move a few more workers up into the artisan area. Not a big grouping, just a couple. And now that we've got the necessary electricity, it's time to start building our first cargo ship so that we can start getting that planned to use in replacement of certain ships that are currently running routes, specific frigates. And that's going to take a bit, because figuring out which ships are currently being used, where they are in the middle of the routes, things like that are definitely going to take some time. We got enough rum, but as you can also see, we don't have any penny farthings, so the few 12 tons that we're getting from the import-export are just not enough. We're going to have to figure out how we're going to increase that. Either bring some cowchuck over, something along those lines. You can see right there, Madame Kahina does sell chocolate, and
Don't tell me I've missed another appointment.
there's the pocket watches. So Arthur actually sells the pocket watches.
It is not my job to know their crimes. Only
And
to
Eli
find
actually
a
sells
fitting
gold, which is needed to create the pocket watches. So those are a couple of things that we can look
Your
at
ship
for the
has
next
returned
episode
from its voyage.
or upcoming episodes, is how do we want to get these items? Do we really, really want to work hard at finding the exact resources in order to create them? Or do we want to just, bring in from outside, bring in the necessary resources from the outside to create them, stuff like that? So this is where we're going to take a look at the routes that are currently running. This is where the Argus is. The Argus is the one that runs work clothes from Luton to Barcelona and then picks up 150 tons of rum from Barcelona in order to bring that back to Newcastle. And it's actually just recently dropped off a bunch of rum in Newcastle, which is why the artisans and engineers are doing okay. Yeah, right now it's in the New World. So then the next one is the one that runs cotton from Sevilla to Newcastle, which allows us to create fur coats in Newcastle, which the artisans need. It's currently en route as well. At least that's what the game is telling us.
You have a conscience.
Yeah, and then the last one is beer from Wrexham to Madrid. That's also running on a different ship. And by the way, the reason I did that isn't because I necessarily needed to, but because of the locations of the islands and where the ships come in and out of the worlds, it made sense to potentially set up separate routes for each of them. With steamships, as I mentioned earlier, we're not necessarily going to need to worry about that quite so much. So now that we're in the New World, let's take a look at each of our islands and spend some time kind of catching up. We have not spent a lot of time in the New World over the last 3 or 4 episodes because we've been so focused on getting electricity and tractors and motors and all of that kind of stuff, plus making sure to keep Crown Falls moving and growing. And we're noticing here at Barcelona, Barcelona has got 8 oil fields, and there is a coastline right there to the right. So there's the potentiality here to build and extract oil from Barcelona and send all of it out via that right-hand coastline up to Madrid, and then very easily get electricity into Madrid. Now here's the very, very cool thing. If we move some of the calamari and the fish oil from the left-hand side of the trading post over to the right, we can actually put an oil harbor right there and run a track directly into an electrical plant that'll feed all of the production in Madrid. A lot of great opportunity. We're taking a look at Norwich right now to see about concrete, because concrete is going to be needed to create the harbor. And unfortunately, the thing that's happened is we've transported so much concrete
Complacency is the
from Norwich to Newcastle that Norwich doesn't have anything. So what I think we're going to actually need to do is start to slow down the transport. Instead, just to make things quick, I'm going ahead and take the Sweet Harmony, put 100 tons of concrete on it from Newcastle, and we're going to send that over to Madrid and Barcelona so that we can quickly spin up those 2 oil harbors, so we can create the necessary oil fields and the oil refinery. Hopefully that will be enough. The other problem, though, and I'm actually just realizing this as I'm recording the voiceover, you also need a lot of steel for the railroad tracks, and none of the islands in the New World are actually creating steel. So I'm actually going to write myself a note for this so that in the next episode we can start to figure out how can we get steel into the New World on a regular basis. One of the things that we need to figure out is where can we plant coffee. So we figured out we're going to get oil from Barcelona. But what about coffee plantations? You know, most of the islands that are sustaining themselves already have coffee or have it coming soon. So what are we going to do to get coffee from the New World to the Old World? And I think Manola is the perfect location for it. It's a huge island, therefore we've got plenty of space. We just need to increase the population, grow the population so that they can actually start building out, first of all, coffee for themselves, and that's part of the Abrera need line that you're seeing right here. First we got to get them tortillas though first. Great grammar. Then we can open up coffee. So let's go ahead through the process here of getting them tortillas, which is a combination of corn and beef, to then create the tortillas, and then that will get them to the point of where they're potentially, we might need to put in a few more houses, but that should start us to get them ready for coffee.
They will never experience the bliss that comes with progress.
Yeah, so here we are. We got cattle and we've got corn. Now, you can already see down in the bottom right-hand corner that we have farms. Right there is where we're getting our llamas to get felt. So we're just going through the process, and I'm being a little anal here of where my cattle farms are, how they're being placed, so it makes the most sense. And I'm struggling with the user interface, which is why I keep doing things it looks like 3 or 4 times. Alright, so we've got our cattle farm. Now it's going to be time for corn. And of course, now that everyone is pissed off at us and reduced reputation, they decide to give us gifts. For placement purposes and for space purposes, I thought it would make sense to take the existing plantation that we've got there, the sugarcane plantation, make it vertical, and then we can easily place the corn right directly next to it, and they'll line up a lot better and take up less space that way. I also did that because I know that there's clay right above, and I really was keeping an eye on that, knowing that at some point we're going to need brick in order to stand up certain buildings. So I wanted to make sure that we still had an easy way of getting access to that and transporting it, you know, from where it is to the road. And because of that, more than likely, we're going to want to find a different location to actually plant the coffee so that we don't have any conflicts with the clay pit there. However, there is another clay pit just above that one even. So we've got the corn and the meat now. All we need is the tortilla maker and can easily place that down. And that's the next step for Manola. But I noticed there was a nice hole there, so I decided to put in a few more farmers. That'll take care of the farm that we just planted, as well as the cattle. and put us in a perfect position to eventually plant coffee in the next episode here on Manola. Then we'll have to figure out the routing of how we're going to get that back over to Newcastle. Because actually the first thing will be to plant enough coffee so that Manola can sustain itself with the Abreras that it has. But then the step 2 is doubling, tripling that production, just like I did on Barcelona with respect to rum, so that we can actually send that coffee back over to the old world. The one thing that's different, though, about rum from coffee is that pretty much every island in the New World chain has the necessary fertility to plant coffee, whereas that is very much not the case with respect to rum and sugarcane. We only found 2 islands that I have that actually support sugarcane fertility. Now, I'm sure Lady Margaret has some, and I'm sure that George has some, but I definitely did not find that many. So we're back over in the old world, and we are back at Newcastle.
Cargo boat at the ready.
And we have our first cargo ship ready for us. Now it's time to start messing with the routes. But before we can do that, we have to know where the ships are. We've got to be able to take the goods that they currently have and make sure that we don't lose them in any way. So with the cotton ship, it's on the way to the New World, we believe. So we want to make sure that we do this in the right way to make the most sense, depending upon where the ships currently are.
You can
So,
rely on us.
for example, the White Whale, which is doing the beer run between Wrexham and Wrexham and Barcelona. Sorry, Wrexham and Barcelona. I could not think of which island it was going to. Is actually on its way back and is going to be entering the old world right about now. So we're going to be able to actually work with that one first to handle the necessary requirements for moving that to a cargo ship. So we go down to Wrexham, and because of where the ship actually enters, it'll be showing up in Wrexham here very, very shortly. Quests are still moving along. They're not progressing, and they're probably going to fail. For some particular reason, I thought I was very clearly in the happiness chain for that particular quest, but apparently it doesn't appear that that's the case. So the Wrexham cargo ship should actually be at Wrexham by now. It's actually sitting in port. So this is where we can go through the process of pausing the route, taking everything off the ship, I fumble around here. Really all that I need to do at the end is delete the route. But before I can delete the route, I don't want to lose the goods. So we need to make sure to go through the process of setting this up properly. So we're bringing the new cargo ship, the steam cargo ship, the Sharp Gust, over to Wrexham to kick things off quickly. But before we can kick things off quickly, we need to go ahead and remove the goods from the White Whale. I, to be honest with you, do not know why there were work clothes on the white whale. It was probably left over from some other purpose or some other reason. So at this point, the white whale is not going to be needed. So we can actually send that up to Arthur to be sold. And we actually get a little bit of influence back for that. Although I have not been really using influence a lot. I've primarily been using it for propaganda within the newspapers to keep the newspapers positive. But once the cargo ship makes its way down to Wrexham, we can set it up to do the exact same route between Wrexham and Barcelona. So this is where we were bringing the concrete in from Newcastle into Madrid so that we have that ready for us when we go to do the oil and electricity production. The other thing is there was a leftover botanical garden item sitting in Madrid. So we want to make sure to go ahead and bring that back over to Newcastle and put it in the botanical garden and increase our attractiveness, even if it's only by a couple. I think it's 20 points. Lady Margaret's got a quest for us.
Choose the pieces. They move of their own accord.
Oh, look at the poor travelers stranded at sea. They must have been caught up in a storm. Bring them to me, child, and I shall warm them up.
I hope you find it illuminating.
So that's an easy item to keep our reputation with her bad, but it, you know, at least she's not attacking us yet. So we're gonna go ahead and take a leftover ship that's sitting in
Stations.
the New World and go grab those stranded individuals to make sure to solidify that quest. All I'm doing here is waiting for the cargo ship to show up at Wrexham. The problem is that it showed up at the Docklands rather than at the main trading post. As I said, it's one of those things that tends to happen. So it's now running the route. All I did was take the original route and change the ship that was associated with it. So it's grabbing the beer. It's now then going to go to Barcelona in order to drop off that beer. Now, the good thing is now that we have a steamship running that route, we'll absolutely be able to use that for other potential things because of the increase in capabilities of the steamships. Now we're actually trying to take a look and figure out, well, where's the Argus, as it's the one that's doing the rum and work clothes? Where's the Black Flag? You know, those are the other two that are going back and forth. And if we can consolidate those from 3 ships down to 2, then that absolutely makes sense. So what I just did here was the Black Flag was actually en route to the New World to go pick up cotton. And instead, it had not done so yet, so I went ahead and removed it from the route. And I'm actually now deleting the route altogether. And I'm going to then add cotton to the route that's already being used for the beer. So that's what we're doing here. Now, it's going to end up looking quite ugly. We didn't ever get enough penny farthings, which is why we failed that particular citizen quest. But in here, we're now going to go and say, okay, instead of just doing Wrexham to Madrid for the beer, I apologize, I thought it was Barcelona. We're now also going to go to Sevilla. So after we go and drop off the 50 tons of beer to Madrid, we can go to Sevilla. We can pick up 75 tons of cotton fabric, and then make sure to bring that back to Newcastle. So it's going to be a 4-way trip, but due to the increased capability of steamships, we should be okay. You will notice, though, that as I was choosing the cotton fabric from Sevilla, there were only 36 tons currently sitting in the inventory of Sevilla, which means that Sevilla is struggling to keep up with the demand of Newcastle.
Admiral.
So one of the things that we're going to have to do, this is me sending the white whale up to Arthur to go up and, or Clarence, sorry. No, Sir Archibald, High Clarence Hall, sending the white whale up to actually be sold. Now, we're only getting 10,000 gold for it, but as you can see, I've got 8.16 million in the bank.
Oh, so you don't like work?
I don't really necessarily need 10,000. It's more about getting the influence back. So that'll go up there and we'll sell that eventually. And now we've got our route set up for the Sharp Gust so that it can take over both the
Just say the word.
cotton fabric and the beer. Now, at some point, we're probably going to want to clean that up a little bit. With 4 stops, maybe we can. I'm not really sure what's going to make the most sense based on distances, because Sevilla's kind of in the middle of the New World. Madrid is above it, so when it comes in, it's actually going to naturally hit Madrid first, then Sevilla. The problem is then when it comes back, Newcastle and Wrexham are almost at 2 different opposite ends of the map on the old world. So we'll have to figure something out there. The other thing is we're not sending any beer to Barcelona, and that would make sense to do as well. As we have been going through all of this, though, it has been very obvious that certain New World islands are not necessarily working as easily or as well as we would like them to be. So this is where we're going to take a look and figure out, well, why is that? The people are happy. They're getting what they need, but we're not necessarily producing enough, in this case, cotton fabric on Sevilla, in order to be able to do what we need.
It's the small things in life.
So one of the things I'm looking at here is what is the ratio between cotton mills and the cotton fabric, or the cotton plantations and the cotton mill. And it looks like we don't have enough cotton fabric or cotton mills. We have 2 cotton plantations, but we've only got the 1 cotton mill. So if we put in a second one, hopefully that will help with the production of that right number that we're going to need to pick up for transport over to Newcastle. Now, that being said, if we're going to grow the population on Sevilla at all,
Hoping to enlighten me?
there's Lady Margaret's quest all taken
Wise
care of,
beyond your
which is excellent.
years.
If we are going to increase the population of Sevilla at all, we will probably need to put in another cotton plantation in order to support Bombans, which right now we're not doing. However, Sevilla is a very, very small island, so we've got to be very careful about how much growth happens there, and that's something that we can look at over time, but we don't need Sevilla to grow. Barcelona, Madrid, Manola, those are the ones that we really want to think about from a growth perspective, because they've got the geography to support it. Sevilla, Cartagena, and Valencia do not, for different reasons. Sevilla is just a small island. Valencia, on the other hand, has got a gigantic mountain that is on the back side of it, which prevents a lot of growth.
Great minds think alike.
I could simply go to press.
And we have another wonderful newspaper that's talking about scarcity of beer in Barcelona because Barcelona never had any to begin with, which is something else that I want to make sure to write down for the next couple of episodes, is trying to fix some of this. If I know we are making more than enough beer between Wrexham and Newcastle to be able to support these small islands in the New World, I think we should absolutely be able to get beer to Barcelona as well as part of one of these routes.
Mind control and martial law.
You think that is goodness?
Yeah, they really don't like propaganda.
Celebrate your leadership.
Yet, man, I'm getting city festivals all over the place.
Hola.
So I'm going to say this again. In the next episode, if you'll notice, there's a whole entire centralized area of production going on right there. Between mezcal and ponchos and bombins and cigars and all those kinds of things. all we've got to do is move these 3 fisheries. One of them's a calamari fishery. We can move all of those over to the right-hand side, or as far over as possible, and then place the oil harbor right there, run it up to an oil electrical plant, which will feed every bit of that production. Now, the only concern that I have with that is, are we going to have the resources
Beware
necessary?
the penalty for stubbornness.
And then, of course, Lady Margaret decides to threaten war. This worries me as well,
I'm touched.
because I don't have the ability to go to war with her. But it looks like, based on that, we're going to have to start thinking about it and preparing for it. So I'm just taking a look at one of Lady Margaret's islands to understand, what does it cost to acquire the island or acquire shares of the island, setting ourselves up for takeover and things like that. But the minute we start it with one, we got to be prepared to protect all of the others. And that's where things really start to get rocky. And we're going to have to start thinking about, well, how do we protect our islands? Some of it is via gun placements, which right now I have a few in the old world, but I don't have much in the new world. Things like that, as well as, having the right ships, which I definitely do not have at the moment. The frigates actually will work as battleships, but they're sail ships. They don't have a lot of consistency, nor do they have a lot of guns, for that matter. I really did not want to have to worry about war. And for the future, the next time I decide to start a new run of Anno 1800, I'm going to make sure that either I have the right AI players to go against that are not warriors. I don't know. We're going to have to think about that for the long haul. In the meantime, we're still taking a look at routes and figuring out what the deal is with Barcelona. You can see right there with Barcelona, they've only got 27 tons sitting in inventory. And that is definitely not enough to support 150 tons.
Thank you for it.
That's going to be picked up in order to transport over to Newcastle. So that's something to consider for the next episode as well, is why is that happening? One is, are we producing enough rum based off of the rum refineries there? The other is, remember, we set up routes a few episodes ago to keep all of the small islands in rum as well. So there's the Black Flag that was originally going to be picking up the rum. We can now send that back to the old world to be sold. But the rum over in Barcelona is now not just sending rum to Newcastle. It's now also sending rum to Sevilla, sending rum to Madrid, and sending rum to Valencia. No, not Valencia. Valencia's got its own sugarcane plantations. I think it's just Madrid and Sevilla. But that, is taking up a lot of that rum production. So one of the things that if we look at the inventory for Barcelona, we're going to see that it's full up with sugarcane, but not necessarily full up with rum. We're just taking a look here at Valencia to see what kind of space it has to add in additional things. One of the things, we are going to have to increase the production of soccer balls on Valencia.
Your ship has returned from its voyage.
Because
A new commission?
there's our botanical garden item. We can go ahead and put that in and put in a new exhibition for that. Is Straghorn Coral. So that's another 20 points of attractiveness. It's not, as I said, it's not a lot, but it's something. It adds. You know, one thought I have as I'm watching this and doing the voiceover.
Stations.
Sir Archibald.
Well, there's the sale of the white whale. Is, you know, there's a couple of blocks on Newcastle that have no buildings on them. There's no reason why I couldn't just fill it completely with ornaments. I've got the money to do it. The thing is I just don't know how much of an advantage it's going to provide.
New orders, Admiral.
One of the things that I want to do, being that I have the black flag available to me in the new world, is taking some advantages with respect to the excess aluminum that I have. Because aluminum at the moment for us is only being used for post offices. So if we can stand up post offices in some of the smaller locations in the new world that we haven't spun them up on already, then let's go ahead and make sure to do that. What we're going to do now is we're going to take the black flag and send it over to Barcelona so that we can put a post office there. And the thing about Barcelona, because everything is so tightly compact, we can probably cover almost every one of the houses there, whether they're farmers or obreras or whatever, or jornaleros or obreras or whatever, and get all of them at one time. It's just going to be a question of finding the right location. What we're doing here is we've got, for some particular reason, I put a marketplace all the way up top there, and I know that I had houses up there, but for whatever reason they're not there anymore, so I wanted to move the marketplace back down closer.
You can rely on us.
Yeah, and this is where the Argus is picking up the rum, and it's really time to think about, well, how do we handle rum moving forward? Because rum right now, there's just not enough being produced and being transported back and forth between Barcelona and Newcastle. So we've paused the route. We're going to remove everything from the route. Actually, we're just going to completely delete the route. So that deletes the route. Now the ship has still got rum on it, so we want to make sure to remove that rum. And of course, the best thing to do is just go ahead and send it to Newcastle. What we'll then have to do in the next episode is set up a new route. But before we can do that, you see right there, there's 341 pieces of sugarcane sitting in the inventory. This is where I figured out that, okay, we're not producing as much rum as we have sugarcane. So why is that? Now, there's plenty of wood, and the strange thing is that it is a 1-for-1 from sugarcane to rum. You know, every 30 seconds it's a ton. Yet, for some particular reason, there's an excess of sugarcane. So let's take advantage of that, and let's create a new rum distillery to hopefully add additional inventory. Nice and easy. Make sure that there's a road running alongside. Bingo. So over time in the next episode, hopefully that will fill up. There is a new cargo ship that we'll need in order to set up this new route to cover for the rum transport. And if we don't do that, then, you know, Newcastle's going to be short on rum, and that's going to hurt numbers big time. So the aluminum has now been dropped off. We can now create our post office for Barcelona, which will increase our population by a little bit, but primarily it's going to be used to create additional revenue. Not that we necessarily need it, but hey, more money is always good. This is where I do something stupid. What I mean by that is, in order to provide the best coverage for the post office, I want to do as many obreras rather than farmers as possible, because I actually have farmers in 2 different places. But I stupidly upgraded the bottom part of the Jornaleras to obreras, and therefore made things difficult for myself when I wanted to go and actually put the post office in its best location, which is right about where you're seeing it right now. So I'm now going to go through a very complicated process of moving things around in order to have the best coverage, and what I actually end up doing is only turning on local mail for the obreras, because that's what gets covered the most. But in order to make that happen, I have to have all the obreras on the right part of the map. The other big thing of this is the boxing arena, which is a requirement for obreras to be happy. So we want to make sure to put it in the best location for the obreras to take advantage of it. So that also forces another set of moves, because the post office needs to go where the boxing arena originally was. So we put the post office in the middle. Now we go through the process of moving things around to make sure that everyone is happy.
Thank you. Honest.
We'll have it back soon enough.
And this is where we get the flip side of the removal of
Spread some
reputation,
happiness with it.
but the increase in coins that we get from Anne and George. Which then makes me want to look at the diplomacy. And as you can see, both Anne and Jean Lafortune are allies. George apparently will not let me be an ally. No real reason why, but he is, I do have trade rights with him. And then, of course, we only have peace with Lady Margaret. And I really, truly feel like that's going to end very, very badly. So what I'm looking at here is what it takes for the battle cruiser. So right now we cannot create all of the ships that are available in the steam shipyard, only the oil tanker, the cargo ship, and the steam battlecruiser. The other ones all require investors. But the main thing that is going to be required for the battlecruiser that we do not have is this, the advanced weapons. And the advanced weapons require saltpeter. They also require tallow. Those two things create dynamite, and then combined with steel furnaces will create heavy weapons. Now the thing about this is we removed the regular weapons factory
Just say the word.
from Newcastle, with the thought being that that would help reduce pollution and things like that. We have Norwich, which is currently being used to produce brass, it's being used to produce concrete, and it's just full of minerals. So there's a chance that we can potentially use Norwich to create our advanced weapons as well. There's enough extra iron, coal, there is, I believe that there is saltpeter over there as well, and we can potentially use Norwich in the future for advanced weapons. Yeah, so if we look at Norwich here, it has the saltpeter fertility. It has all of the minerals. So there's really no reason why, and we're not using all of the mines at all. So there's really no reason why we couldn't add in additional furnaces as well as saltpeter. We would of course have to spin up another pig farm to create tallow, and then create all of the advanced weapons here, and then ship them over to Newcastle as well. This actually leads to a topic we talked a little bit about earlier, was the fact that there's no concrete here at Norwich. You can see there's only 2 tons up in the top bar, and that's because everything's being sent over to Newcastle. We can actually probably stop the cargo ship and go ahead and sell it, and then just use a new ship, a new steam cargo ship, and send it over when necessary, because these are items that aren't being used on the regular. They're being used for building things, so we want to make sure to be a little bit more careful about it. But once we get enough advanced weapons, we can start spinning up battle cruisers, and then take a look at, you know, how do we protect ourselves, how do we prepare for war, if in fact we're going to go down that path. I hope not, but if we have to do it, we have to do it. And what I may have to do is put all of my money and time into focusing on just doing that and getting rid of Lady Margaret before we worry about doing anything else. And while we're here, let's go ahead and upgrade a few buildings here in Norwich. We had too many farmers and not enough workers. And we actually don't have any artisans here in Norwich at all. And with that, I think this is a perfect place to end this particular episode. I have a huge list of things to look forward to for upcoming episodes. So as always, if you are enjoying the content, please make sure to hit the like button, please make sure to hit the subscribe button, and hopefully I will see you in the next episode.